Have you come to this video wondering how to make this match day graphic? Well, stay for the full duration of the video and unlock the 4 letters to use the PSD. I'm not going to keep you waiting any longer, so let's jump into it. What I'm going to do for my first few steps is I'm going to drag and drop some of my media day images into the composition. We'll put this one in, going to resize it like so, and then I'm also going to put one more in. Go with this one, and then as we can see here, there's just a little bit of, oh, is that the background? Yeah, I think it is. It just looks like it's coming from our studio image here. And we'll also resize this one too, just because we want the sizes to be looking correct. We'll fix this one up, make it a little bit bigger, and then press Ctrl-0 to resize our sizing. We're going to hide our libraries so we can fully see what we're doing. I'm going to lock our background layer, so we're just selecting out to cutout images at the moment. We'll make a layer mask after grouping those together. Using our black brush, we'll put our flow around 20%, and we'll just fade these 2 images into our background, like so. Just fading them in. We want a kind of circlish-like curve going on there, and we'll come back into our 2 layers, holding down Control on both of them, just to fix up our cutout just a little bit. Then we'll come into both of them, come to camera raw filter, and what I'm going to do is increase the exposure, put that that texture all the way up, a little bit of clarity increase, knock that saturation down just a tiny little bit, and then increase our sharpening, and we'll duplicate those effects onto the other image as well. Then I'm going to come to photo filter, slap it on this one, and we're going to put our density to around 23%. And we'll just copy and paste that onto our other images as well. But what I'm going to do is then get to our selective color, which is in our adjustment layers. We'll clip it, come to our blues, and then we'll get our blue back into the kit, like so, just so it doesn't seem too orangey. We don't want a photo filter, we actually want our selective color, like so. And there we go, we can see the difference that makes, just gets the blues back into our graphic. I'm gonna resize our right one just a slight little bit. We're just gonna make it a little bit bigger than it already is. And then I'm going to come between the 2 layers, and then I'm gonna put some shadow just between them, like so, just so we've got a bit of contrast going on. So as you can see, I've drag and dropped another image in. So what I'm going to do is go to select and then click on select subject, and that will cut out our subject from the background. Then I'm gonna put our flow back up to 100%, and I'm just gonna zoom in and fix up any mistakes the AI has made when it's selecting the subject. Usually I'll use the pen tool to cut these out, but just to speed up the process, we're going to use our select subject tool, and we'll just fix up any of the mistakes with the layer mask quickly, just to make things a lot more cleaner. We'll do the same for the kits, just fixing it up. And then we'll come to filter, go to other, and then click on minimum, and it will just get rid of any little things on the outside that don't look very nice. And then we'll clip the ball back into the graphic, like so. We're going to make this tiny little bit smaller, probably around 88 pixels for our brush size. And then what we'll do is we're going to put some shadow in. So we're going to have to find a way to contrast this, because we're using obviously a black background. So what we'll do is we'll come to our floor shadows brush. We'll select foot shadow 2, and then we'll draw in our shadows. Put one here, and one here. We're gonna have to go pretty strong with this, just so it's visible to the eye and for the viewer or reader to see. Put our flow back down to around 12-ish%, and we'll draw our shadows on around the ball and around the legs. We'll put that back up to around 25%. We'll zoom right in and draw that shadow in just behind the legs and also in front, so we have some contrast. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the exact same camera raw onto these images here. So we'll just drag and drop that in. What I'm actually going to do is to match it to the other images. I'm going to increase our exposure just a little bit, and that clarity, and a little bit more texture, and a tiny little bit more sharpening as well, like so. Then we'll get our selective color and try and match it to the back images, just so the kits aren't looking too different. We'll move this over just a slight little bit. Actually, we'll move the backing image over just that little bit more, like so. We'll get our smaller image that we've used, and I'm going to resize it just that little bit. We'll make a layer in between the 2 layers here, and we'll just put a bit of shadow in the background, just so we've got some contrast for what's going on. We'll hide these 2 layers again. What I'm going to do is, again, I'm actually just going to move this over a little bit, just because I need some room for where our text is going to be for the graphic. What I've gone and done here is just dragged and dropped our sponsors logos in for what this graphic is obviously going to be used for. Then again, I'm going to play around with our selective color, as I want to really kind of match those colors that we've got going on so the kits don't look too different. So we'll come into our blues, and then we'll play around with our saturation. We kind of want to desaturate the image a little bit and turn down our lightness. We'll also continue to play around with our selective color as well, trying to really get those colors to match the same as our background. But we'll come back in, and because we can see a little bit of an error with our cutout, turn our flow back up to 100%, and using our black brush, we're just going to fix that up like so. So it doesn't look as weird as it did before, and we'll do the same for his knee. The font that we're going to be using is Museo Sans. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in game, we're going to type in match, and then we're going to type in day. I'm going to put our middle paragraph to the left, and then we're going to use the AA and bring this all the way back up to about here. We want around, 6%. We want this text to be a little bit bigger than it already is. So what I've gone and done in my own time is added some little things around the sides and just changed the image on the bottom just to make things on the composition look a little bit more balanced and a little bit better for the graphic. So let's jump back into things and continue designing this. For my next few steps, what I'm going to do is, as you can see already, and as I've mentioned, I've tried to balance out our graphic and what we've got going on here, just because the previous image that I had cut out didn't really fit with the flow of the other images in our composition, and I just wanted to change things up to make it look a little bit nicer. So I'm just going to continue to fix and cut out this image here, just because, again, with our select subject tool that I've used, it just hasn't really cut out the image to the background very nicely. So I'm just going through and fixing things up myself in the areas that it hasn't really done a good job. I'm going to scroll down to our background, come back into our libraries. Actually, what I'm going to do is download an image off Facebook just to use in our graphic, a recent photo I took of the ground. And then what we'll do is we'll drag and drop this image in like so, as I want the lights and the grass to be the main feature of the graphic. Then what I'm going to do is put it on to black and white, and we'll turn our opacity to around 6-ish%, and then we'll get our soft brush, put it around 20%, and then we'll just draw away the bottom half of it, as again we want the background to be featured mainly within it. So we'll turn that opacity up, and then I'm going to come in and I'm going to change all of these to white, not to this blue that we've got going on, as it doesn't really work. I'm going to double click on these two layers, holding down Control on their layer mask. I'm going to press Control Shift and I, then I'm going to press Alt and Backspace, change it to linear dodge add as well while keeping the clipping mask on, and we'll duplicate that again and do one for the other side. And then we'll come into this layer as well, press Control Shift and I, Alt and Backspace, sorry, then linear dodge. Make sure it's clipped, of course, duplicate that and put one on the other side as well. And we can just see the difference that those two have made very quickly. And I'm going to fix up our layer mask for what's going on here, as we'll come back in and we'll fix this up. Done. And then we'll do our same for this image here, holding down Control, making a new layer, Control Shift Alt and I, and then Alt and Backspace, changing it to linear dodge add, putting one on one side and then putting one on the other side like so, just a tiny little bit, and we can just see the difference that makes. Just give something extra to the graphic. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to fix up our layer mask here, just because it's a little too soft around the edges for me, and we'll fix up the hair as well. What I'm going to do is going to come back in. I'm just going to put a bit of shadow behind this image here just to balance things out like so, and we'll put a bit of shadow in. Then for my final few steps, I'm going to get the font Museo Sans 900. We're going to type in 12:30 and 2:30 p.m. Johnston Park. Not spell it that bad. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on our two TTs. I'm going to make this text very small and we'll middle it. Then what I'm going to do with our rectangular marquee tool is I'm going to make sure all of this is middled. Move it down slightly to around where I reckon the middle is. I'm going to make the text a little bit bigger, probably around 3%, and then turn our VA all the way up. We'll put this down to around 2.5, maybe even 2.25, just to make it a little bit smaller. And again, we'll make sure this is in the middle. Then we'll play around with where the text is sitting to make sure it's a little bit bigger, and so people can see it. We'll come back into our layer graphic, and I'm going to fix up this layer mask, just because the ball looks a little bit weird. So now that doesn't look as weird as it was looking before. We'll come back into our match day, and what I'm going to do is actually put a little bit of outer glow behind it, just to make it stand out a little bit more from our background. Then we'll come back into our libraries, we'll drag and drop our logo in like so. Then I'm going to come to our team logos. I'm going to drag the Thornton logo in, and what I'm going to do is double click on the layer. Then I'm going to come up to select subject and then come to select color range. Then I'm going to press Ctrl I. We're going to apply a layer mask, and then again, we're going to come to select subject and then select color range, and we'll press Ctrl I again. Then we'll copy and paste this into our graphic like so. We'll double click on the layer and then put our color overlay on it, and then we'll resize like so. We'll make sure these two are sitting next to each other like they're middled. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually resize our two studio images just that little bit more, so they're taking up a bit more background space like so, just so they look a little bit more bigger and there's less dead space within our graphic. Move these two over. I might make this one slightly smaller so it's sitting about there. We'll come back into our layer mask. With our soft brush, we'll knock this flow down down to around 20%. Then we'll draw away with our layer mask. We might move the text and logos up just that little bit more like so. Might move it across just that little bit and make it a little bit bigger. And I might even drag this above our background layer like so, just so it's slightly sitting over the arm. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Ctrl Shift Alt and E. I'm going to come to camera raw filter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a clarity of around 20 onto this, increasing the contrast a little bit, a bit of exposure burst, and then a fair amount of grain. We want around 16%. We'll come to our optics, and then we'll put our vignette to around 17%. And we can just see the difference that makes. Then for my final few steps, I'm going to come into my texture pack. We'll drag and drop this paper texture in. What I'm going to do is put it onto screen, and then we're going to turn our opacity down to around 20%. We'll rotate it clockwise and then put this on our layer. And that's for our final few steps. So if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, comment down below what you want to see next. Thank you for watching, and see ya.